Shalom Chaverim and Chag Sameach. Chag Pesach is coming up. And today, Echad Ha'am. Just especially for Passover, Echad Ha'am has, in this book of essays, I highly recommend, an essay that is called, nonetheless, Slavery in Freedom. And therefore, I thought it was appropriate to introduce it today. And I'm going to start by reading a segment from that essay, and then we're going to talk about it. Today, while I'm still alive, I try, mayhap, to give my weary eyes a rest from the sin of ignorance, of degradation, of unutterable poverty that confronts me here in Russia, and find comfort by looking yonder across the border, where there are Jewish professors, Jewish members of the academies, Jewish officers in the army, Jewish civil servants. And when I see there, behind the glory and the grandeur of it all, a twofold spiritual slavery, moral slavery, and intellectual slavery. And I ask myself, do I envy these fellow Jews of mine their emancipation? I answer in all truth and sincerity, no, 1,000 times no. The privileges are not worth the price. Okay, so what is Echad Ha'am is talking about here? So this is end of the 19th century, and Echad Ha'am writing from the territories of the Russian Empire and looking west to fellow Jewish people, specifically here in this essay, French Jews, who underwent emancipation, received more rights, and with that changed their Judaism. To the point where some of those Jewish professionals decided to keep only one aspect of their Judaism, which was the religious aspect. So basically shedding the nationality aspect of their Judaism. So if all religious belief is allowed, no matter, what God you believe in, then they're allowed to continue in believing in the Jewish God or the God of the Jews, but their nationality would be through and through French. So that decision of those Jewish people is what Echad Ha'am called slavery in freedom. So basically it's what he called moral and spiritual and intellectual slavery, as we just read. Now, it's not a new idea in Western thought or a recent Western thought that freedom comes with a price. Just recently, we brought up Erich Fromm and his Escape from Freedom, right? So Erich Fromm, who wrote it in 1941, right in the middle of the Second World War, tried to figure out how come millions of people willingly gave away their freedom for the nation, right? And Erich Fromm concluded that there is great anxiety which comes with freedom, and people therefore want to do away with it, right? So Fromm distinguished, and just kind of like a quick reminder between the negative freedom and the positive freedom. So the negative freedom was the freedom from. So basically, if you are a slave, if you're in bondage, if you are oppressed, if your human rights are taken away and you want to be free from it, okay, so that's what the negative freedom is. The positive freedom is freedom to. Okay, so it's freedom to do things. And that is the freedom that scares people, right? Is what do I do with all this freedom to choose, right? And so what people end up doing, and Fromm called it the conforming automaton, is really try to conform around an idea. It could be a cult, and it could be Nazism. So we've seen it before. Also, if you think of Karl Popper and his book, The Open Society and Its Enemies. So that is the same idea, only in when it comes to, the fragility of liberal democracies, right? So why liberal democracies are so fragile is because people are anxious to be thrusted with the responsibility for the political outcome. And it's what Karl Popper called the strain of civilization, right? So people always seek to limit their own freedoms. But what Echad Ha'am is saying here is that he's saying that sometimes freedom should be limited. And it should be limited not in a negative way, but in a positive way. It should be limited by choice. So basically, in order not to conform, you should limit your freedom too, but out of your free will. So this is kind of like a Freudian analysis of Echad Ha'am. And so when the French Jews that he talks about, they chose to strip their nationality, they basically said that the only core values that they want to adhere to are the values of the French Revolution, which are liberty, equality, and fraternity, right? I read a fascinating essay from a research fellow at the Hartman Institute, an Israeli named Regev Ben David, who said that when we think today of these three core values, right, liberty, equality, and fraternity, we know that there's tension between them, right? So, for example, there's tension between liberty and equality, right? Because if you want to form an equal society, some liberties must be given away. It must be given up, right? And so what Echad Ha'am, though, is talking about is about the tension between liberty and fraternity. What does it mean? It means that in order to achieve fraternity with your fellow citizens and be like them, some liberties have to be given away. And in this case, it's the liberty to define yourself as a Jewish person that is belonging to the Jewish nation. And, the times when Echad Ha'am wrote this was the age of Darwinism. And so religion in general was very fleeting and scrutinized. And so, according to Echad Ha'am, and he says it in this essay, if the religious belief is the only thing you have left out of Judaism, in our age of Darwinism, it's, what are you going to do when it's all gone? Then you're just going to stop being Jewish altogether. And he, of course, as we know from today, had a really good point there. And, today in the United States, about half of the Jewish people live in the United States today. And I think it's interesting to think of how many of us renounce our freedom to identify as Jews in order to achieve fraternity with our fellow U.S. citizens. And do we succumb to slavery in freedom? Another thing that Regev Ben David says, and I agree with wholeheartedly, that sometimes freedom can be found inside a boundary. And he uses a really, really beautiful metaphor that when you ascend high enough, let's say to a top of a building, you must put a fence around it, otherwise you will fall down. And for me at least, and for my choice, my boundary is my pride of my Jewish identity. And I want to read for you how Echad Ha'am finishes this very powerful essay. And he says, "At least I know why I remain a Jew, or rather, I can find no meaning in such a question any more than if I were asked why I remain my father's son. I at least can speak my mind concerning the beliefs and the opinions which I have inherited from my ancestors without fearing to snap the bond that unites me to my people. I can even adopt that scientific heresy which bears the name of Darwin without any danger to my Judaism. In a word, I am my own, and my opinions and feelings are my own. I have no reason to concealing or denying them, for deceiving others or myself. And this spiritual freedom, scoff who will, I would not exchange or barter for all the emancipation in the world. That's how Echad Ha'am finishes this essay. And so, when we now embark on this beautiful holiday of Passover, may we all gather around our Seder tables this year, open to the idea of liberation through the pride in who we are. And we will be reminded that families, even though they are of course never perfect, they will always be ours. And I'd like to end with a beautiful poem by Rabbi Judah Halevi that is very appropriate for Echad Ha'am and for Passover, and it's called Servants of Time. I'll read it in Hebrew and then in English. Avdei zman, avdei avadim hem, Eved Adonai hu levad חופשי. על כן בבקש כל אנוש חלקו. חלקי אדוני, אמרה נפשי. Servants of Time by Rabbi Judah Halevi. Servants of time-bound gods are servants of slaves. Only God's servant alone is free. When each human sought their share, my share is Adonai, my soul said to me. Chag Sameach.